What's up, guys? My name is Veronica, also known as Coach V, and I am your host for the Oversharing podcast with Live the Dream Media. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of the Oversharing podcast. Pew, pew, pew. Never misses. David never misses. Thank you guys for being here. Last week was wonderful, and we are on a roll with amazing guests. Before we get into today's episode, we're doing another mini-sode to keep you guys on your toes and informed with all things that are happening with Coach V. Starting off strong with Labor Day weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. I know David had an eventful one. He can maybe tell us a little bit about his, yeah?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. You want to hear about my weekend? Okay. Drove up to Williams, Arizona. It was nice and cool.
The heat.
The morning low was 52 degrees. So everybody, it was great. And then ate a bunch of good food in the small city of Williams, walked around, shopped, spent some good money at some local spots, and had fun with the kids, man. The kids had a great time. They didn't want to leave, so we did the right thing. I love
that. Me and David were just talking about the importance of like sometimes getting out of routine before we started the podcast today. And we might have to have him come on and talk about his relationship with his wife eventually, because I'm definitely a person that appreciates routine and structure when it comes to like building things like a cheer program or work, like being a trainer. There's so much structure. But when it comes to my relationship, sometimes I just want to get out of the funk. And we did that as well. Similar to David, we went up to Mount Lemmon on Saturday. It was really nice. It was super busy, so we only spent a couple hours up there, but caught some lunch down here on 4th Avenue at Bison Witches. Highly recommend. I'm sure most of you in Tucson have been here. If you haven't, you need to check them out. Had a nice bread bowl and a sandwich. It was delicious. And then we drove up to Mount Lemmon and we spent the afternoon there. We got on the ski lift. It's like a 30-minute ride up and down. It was just really, really nice to just enjoy the day. And then on Sunday, I went down to Nogales to spend the afternoon with my family. My dad has a bunch of old classic Ford trucks that he loves to parade around. It's like his pride and joy. I think he likes them more than his children, but that's a story for another time. And we went to have lunch together. We went to the Labor Day rodeo in Sonoyta, which has been a tradition in my family for a long time. So that was really nice. So kind of linking into our special guest today, I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about 2 things that I really prioritize when it comes to my menstrual cycle. Again, we are diving deep today with a lot of hormone health, lots of period talk. So this will be really beneficial for a lot of people. There's a lot of things that I learned later in life that I really wish I would have known when I was younger. So today's guest is going to kind of walk us through her story and educate us and help us get familiar with all these different phases. But one of the things that we will talk about today is your luteal phase. And again, we'll deep dive in a little bit, but essentially that's like right before your period, 10 to 14 days right before your period. And that's where your sis is at right now. She is gravy, not so gravy, traveling through this phase. And it's also trending on TikTok. I'm sure we'll be able to talk about it, but I saw this TikTok about this guy that was like, hey, I asked this girl out and she says she's in her luteal phase. Can someone please tell me what that means? So the girl was like, no, I can't go out. I'm in my luteal phase. That's where I'm at. And I'm just going to give you guys my 2 top tips for right before your period, which is your luteal phase. 2 really important things, and it's going to be easy to remember. Number 1, match your body's energy. And number 2, swap it out. So can I go into depth here a little bit, but right before my period, I am exhausted. I feel like I have like these heat waves before, like in the middle of the night, right before I'm going to start, where I'm not sleeping as well. I'm hot, I'm uncomfortable, and I wake up and my mind is rolling. So I just don't have that much energy throughout the day. So what I mean by match your body's energy is like the second half of your cycle, your estrogen, your progesterone are dropping, you're tired, and you're bloated, and your social cup is empty, and it's just not fun. So sometimes you just have to match yourself where you're at. I kind of like to stay home on those weekends and take it easy, have some tea, movie nights in, maybe order takeout. Take it easy. The second thing is try to swap out things like caffeine to tea, replace that alcohol with some mocktails, and swap those high intensity workouts for more low intensity movement like walking or yoga, which I will be doing today at 4:30. If you go to session yoga, I'll see you at 4:30 today. So with that being said, I am excited to bring our next guest on. 2 things before I forget. Merch. We got merch in. We are so excited. I designed some of these things myself on Canva, of course. If you guys want to get any shirts or mugs, or if you have any ideas of stuff that you might want, feel free to comment anywhere that you're listening, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram Live. Let me know. Where can they find that, David? Where's the merch? Help me.
You can go to our website and click our online shop, and you can find it there.
Perfect.
Live the dream.media.
Live the dream, and you'll see my stuff, and you'll see the Live the Dream media on there as well. And the other thing, if you want to sponsor the show, or make sure you reach out to Live the Dream Media. Live the dream.media, which is our website. Don't forget to choose this podcast so we can get your business promoted to all our amazing listeners. So with that being said, let's get into this intro. Every week I sound like a broken record, but I cannot contain my excitement when I get to bring on amazing guests. So today's guest is the founder of Kormanski's Wellness. She is a holistic health coach with a bachelor's degree in dietetics. Wait, did I say that right? Yeah, I did, right? I said it right. From Penn State University and currently going to school to specialize in fertility. We're ecstatic about having her come on and talk about all things women's hormone health, things like birth control, PMS, missing periods, and so much more. Please welcome to the Oversharing Podcast, Miss Julia Kormanski Miller, joining us via FaceTime today.
The intro was perfect about the luteal phase. Amen to everything you said.
Oh my gosh, I'm slowly dying into the luteal phase. I struggle so much and I have so many questions, so I'm sure that we'll be able to go over some of these in a little bit, but I am so excited that you came on. I know you've had a busy week getting these products up on Amazon and all these fun things. I didn't write down an icebreaker question because I want to get right to it with you. Tell me a little bit about Julia. Tell me about Kormanski's Wellness. We want to know your story. We want to be educated. Tell us everything.
Yeah. So hi guys, my name is Julia. So basically, I own a hormone health food company. So the whole goal of the company is just to be able to bring natural food products to women that actually support their hormones. So not only support their hormones, but support their cycle. Basically, you have 4 different phases of your menstrual cycle, and a huge part of the company is to make sure we're educating women on how to support your hormones so you can really feel your best all month long, and also making sure you're supporting your fertility, because a huge misconception is that fertility is only important if you want to have kids, and it's actually just really important for optimal health. And so the company actually started when I did nutrition coaching. I stopped doing that like in 2023, so mid last year, just because I was really trying to start adding on
a whole new company.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I started with nutrition coaching after I graduated Penn State. I did more like the hormone coaching. I did coursework on holistic health coaching as well. And so I launched it. Kormanski's Wellness was, again, like a coaching company first off. And then it slowly started to migrate into a product-based company. I was in San Clemente, California when I first started selling the seed cycling kits. And I always like to tell people like a little bit more of the very, very beginning origin story, because I actually started just blending them like in my kitchen. And so we'll talk about seed cycling a little bit later.
We'll talk about all the things. But there is a story about what made you really want to dive into hormonal health, right? You had a little bit of some issues with your cycles. I think you talked a little bit about acne. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started, how that evolved into Kormanski's Wellness?
Yeah, so when I was 15, actually, that was when I dealt with a lot of awful acne breakouts, really awful, painful periods. And obviously, I went to the gynecologist, and me and my mom had no idea.
Here's your birth control.
Yeah, birth control. So my mom's like, yeah, like, and she was like, it's the most natural option, like, compared to Accutane. Birth control was, and I'm sure people listening, they can totally resonate with that, because the birth control pill is always looked upon as like the natural route. Like, everyone's on it. It's regulating your hormones. What I was told, I was like, okay, they're all hormonal breakouts, so it makes sense that like I'm going to get on this. And it did help. And it was, I always tell people, it's actually a great experience I had being on birth control. And the reasoning why I got off of it was because I didn't know what the birth control pill actually did. So it suppressed my hormones, and it, again, I didn't really get a period. I thought that was a great thing. But obviously not having a period on the pill isn't good. And actually the pill on your period actually isn't even a period anyway.
Okay, I have to interrupt you, because if not, I'll lose my train of thought. But this is a good place to start right here. So, okay, I think we need to explain that not getting your cycle regularly is not normal. I'm sorry, I'm looking both ways too. I'm looking at you on one screen and then I'm supposed to talk at this screen, you know? So we're going to have to fix this eventually, because I'm weird. But I can you explain like the importance of one, like where did we come up with this idea that not having a period is healthy or like normal, and why women should have a regular menstrual cycle? Like, I feel like that's such a common conception. Is people are like, oh, I don't get my period, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, but that's not normal and that's not healthy.
Yeah, well, if you're not getting your period, that means you're not actually having enough hormones in your body. So basically, your menstrual cycle, you have two like specific hormones. They're estrogen and progesterone. So if you aren't getting your period every single month, you aren't ovulating. And so that's a big word that I know you probably want to break down a little bit. It's basically when egg is released from your ovaries. That happens 14 days about before your period starts. And so that's, again, when your egg is released from your ovary, it's the main event actually of your menstrual cycle. It's not technically your period. Your period is the more something that you can tell kind of right off the bat, but when you have the egg release, there's some other symptoms that you experience, but a lot of women oftentimes don't really notice it because we aren't really taught anything about like the cues that our body gives us to understand when we're ovulating. But it's important because ovulation is actually really important for preventing like cancers when you're older. So again, it's not just like hormone health, it's not just fertility, it's also for cancer, like breast cancer. It's really important to make sure you're ovulating regularly because you're going to be producing a progesterone, which is
I
a really
something every day. That was amazing. Okay, hold on. So you're saying that it's important. I'm sure there's probably some science linked to ovulation and like the benefits of like fighting off cancer. Is that what I'm hearing?
So, for example, like breast cancer, heart health, all of that has to do with also having regular and balanced hormones.
Okay.
If we don't have, we're not able to support all those different functions in our body because hormones are more than just a menstrual cycle thing. You know what I mean? It's more than just better mood or having better PMS or having less PMS, having better fertility. It's also really important for other things like bone health. It's really important, again, because the whole part of breast cancer as well is obviously a lot when it comes to cancer, but a lot of it is also with like excess hormones, estrogen dominance. People with estrogen never know because when you go get conventional testing done, a lot of it is going to be normal.
Gosh. First of all, you're going to have to come back down eventually because I can sit you here and talk about this for hours. I have like 40 different questions in that last like 3 minutes of you talking. So many questions. The fact that people think that like heavy, painful periods is just what we deal with. I don't think I've had a painful period probably in like, I would say like 6 months. Like sometimes every now and then I'll have one and I'm like, oh, something's off. You're either you drank alcohol or you didn't take raspberry leaf tea or you're not supplementing correctly. Like I'm so in tune with myself when it comes to my menstrual cycle. My assistant coach is like, I've never met anybody so in tune with their menstrual cycle. I'm like, you just got to pay attention. And once you pay attention, you realize so many things are not normal. Again, so many questions in my head, but I know that we're going to break these apart. So I'm going to have you go back to how this started with your journey exactly. So you went to the doctor, you started birth control. Tell us everything else.
So I actually found out about what birth control did. It wasn't, so it's funny, I studied nutrition, obviously, at Penn State. And go over any of that, which is a whole other story in terms of like nutrition recommendations, like where that's really coming from, like government overreach, all of that, and how there's a lot of things that are kind of missed when it comes to educating people properly around nutrition and food and what's actually good for us, which is why we see so many chronic health issues, not just hormonal imbalances like in this country. But anyhow, I figured out what birth control actually did. It wasn't until I worked at a juice bar, which is always a funny story because that holistic health, clan and these juice bars, super crunchy people. And I remember someone being like, oh yeah, like that's not even a real period you're getting. Kind of just joking around with me. I was like, excuse me, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And like, I think it's funny because I can always resonate with people who are sometimes a little like, I don't know what she's saying is accurate because I had that same scenario play out. Like I was like, my doctor said that it helped regulate my hormones. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was kind of I was just very lost. I feel like getting confused and just, I don't know. I think a lot of people get uncomfortable sometimes when they aren't aware about it and they kind of get confronted with it from someone. But I just kind of took it in. Again, I think I was 18 or 19 when I learned about it. I was only on birth control for like 3 years since then. I was like, I'm not coming off it anytime soon. And so it did take me a couple years to come off, but I just went off it because the more I did research, like I said, I was like 19 or 20 when I was looking into it. I'm like, this is true. Like if you look at the data, when you look at the combination pill, which is what I was on, if you go on the estrogen and progesterone type of pill and it has both hormones, that's a lot of the times what people are on when they go on it for painful periods and skin. It's usually the Yaz combination pill. And when you look at the data when it comes to contraceptive pills and like the nutrient depletion specifically that happened, that was what alarmed me the most. Is
The
because something's
nutrient depletion? Is that what you said?
yes, yeah. So selenium, magnesium, zinc, and
All things
also
that we need.
yeah, so B vitamins, yeah, things we really need. Like those are really important nutrients as well that I just made up. So if you look
Yeah.
at the nutrients in terms of optimizing fertility and optimizing your cycle, it's literally those core like minerals. They're very important antioxidants, like zinc and selenium specifically. So
Yeah.
it's really
There's
crazy.
so many like avenues of like which way to go with this, because I feel like the conversation of like going to a doctor and them telling you this is the best option, like these are doctors. This is why it's so hard, I feel like, for people to learn on their own, because we trust doctors and then we learn later that we have to advocate for ourselves, which has been like that's overwhelming within itself. And I mean, I know we've talked a little bit back and forth, but that's like the whole point of the podcast when we bring other people on is like, how can we help people educate themselves, learn a little bit more, ask uncomfortable questions? Because at the end of the day, the only person that can really advocate for you is you. So when you go into a doctor's office and you're being told by a professional that this is what is normal and this is what's requested and this suggested whatever, it's really easy to be like, okay, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. And same. I think my birth control story was a little bit different. I chose to go on birth control when I went to college. I was living with my college boyfriend, and we just thought that that was like the best option. And then I was on it for like, I think like 6 or 7 years. And coming off of it wasn't terrible, but my acne went wild when I got off of it. So I had to go through a series of like all these different testing. And again, other avenue you just talked about, like conventional testing for women isn't necessarily helpful. So can we talk a little bit about that, conventional testing versus, I'm sure you're familiar with like the Dutch panel. That's what I did. I know there's like a urine test, there's a saliva test, there's like a hair strand test. What kind of testing did you do after? What have you done, or what do you usually recommend?
Yeah, basically, like long story short, the biggest thing just to know about conventional testing versus holistic is that it's when you go through conventional testing, it's not looking for optimal, it's looking for normal. So that's like basically in a gist for
Okay, I have
people
a
to
question. Freeze.
Okay.
Normal to who?
Normal, so just normal for just if it's not in the disease. That's what I like to say. If it's not in the disease state, they don't look at it. They look at it as normal. So just think about it. Most people are under normal conditions. Like they're not full blown sometimes in disease state. That's the
Yeah.
problem, is because holistic approaches, you're looking at, okay, like we want to make sure we can prevent this as much as possible before it turns into something full blown. And that's why we have so many chronic health issues, is because we only are looking at, so normal is just like most people are normal. Like
I
most
feel like
people.
the way I describe it to my clients, because like I don't know how to read the Dutch panel. It's something that I want to learn how to do. But I've done a Dutch panel a couple times, and I always suggest, I tell my clients, as your friend, I would suggest that you also try to get a Dutch panel done or some kind of more concrete, not so conventional testing. And the way that I feel like I explain it to where people understand, and correct me if I'm wrong because I could be wrong, is that when you go do conventional blood work, one, they're getting one reading when you're fasted at 8 in the morning. Usually it's usually early because you don't really fast all day to go get blood work, right? And then I tell them, like, it's kind of like the graph seems like it's very broad. So if they're comparing you to, say, Tina, who's 50, and that's how wide that graph range is, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where you're at in a sense. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's like the perfect way to describe it, but I feel like that's the way that it makes sense to most people is one, it's like one reading versus a Dutch test that's like a full 6 or 7 urine samples throughout the day. Would you say that that's pretty
It's
cohesive?
just basically more detailed and more specific. And again, the whole point is that, like, I just always like to explain it simply, like in terms of conventional, because I never really did Dutch testing with clients, so I'm not an expert in Dutch testing at all. I'll say that,
Yeah.
but I did get that done, and that's when I fully did know that I had hormonal imbalances. Because a lot of my story, when I did come off and I had all those issues, I did get conventional lab testing done. So that's how I'm aware, like, I was normal and I didn't have a period, and I had all these. I'm like, something's obviously wrong, and it sadly wasn't until like a year or two later when I finally actually did Dutch testing, because my hormone, but something was still off. My cycle was still pretty irregular, and that's when I found out that I like had super high androgens. Like I had full-blown PCOS, but I definitely had a lot of characteristics of that. So,
And that's so common I hear that so
yeah.
often. Like people will go get blood work and they're like, oh, everything's normal. And I'm like, how normal is your normal though? Because my normal was not normal. If you don't mind me asking, what were some of the imbalances that you saw with your Dutch test? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, so a lot of it was high androgens. So, for example, my acne was very like down below. So I always had like higher DHEA. I also had low progesterone, high estrogen,
Yeah.
shocker. So I had like, that's a very common combination I think a lot of people have. So it's just dangerous because when I remember when I met with her, because you always have like another practitioner that you're talking with, she was like, if your estrogen doesn't go down, which it's hard in this world because like even I ate still pretty well at that point when I was dealing with all those issues, but eating well and maybe having a lot of toxins in your environment, like I was still eating out of plastic. Like
Yeah.
I definitely who had a lot of those are endocrine disrupting chemicals. So
I
even if you're
think that's
eating,
something that's like people get easily overwhelmed with. And I remember at one point I was getting a little like overwhelmed with like all the changes that I had to make. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I use about 20 or 30 different products throughout the day. And all like I use the Yucca app. They're not all clean, so many things. I'm going to pause for just a quick second. We're going to cut to a quick ad break. I know that we're on a roll and we'll be right back. Okay.
that's good.
Hi, I'm Alan Murdoch. For the past 20 years, I've been buying, fixing, and selling properties right here in Southern Arizona. And I want to buy your property. Whether it's a house, apartment, commercial building, or vacant land, regardless of the condition or the situation, I want to talk to you. When you sell to me, I pay cash and it's hassle-free. No repairs, no closing costs, and no commissions. If you have a property you don't want to deal with and you want a quick solution, call, text, or visit selltalon.com. Again, that's selltalon.com.
Discover the power of 88 Crime, where your anonymous tips are rewarded with cash. When you call in anonymously with a tip, you are given a code. With the code and a password, you can walk into a bank and redeem your reward anonymously. If your anonymous tip results in a felony arrest, you can claim up to $2,500 cash reward. Let's stop the silence on crime and strive for a safer community. For more information, please visit 88crime.org or call 88crime.
All right, we are back. I'm so sorry. I forgot to do an ad break right after your intro because I was so excited. I was like, get her on here. Fly her over. All right. So kind of picking up where we left off, I was saying what was I saying? I think I was saying I'm having a Dory moment. What did I say, Julia?
I forget we were talking.
I think we were talking about how overwhelming endocrine disruptors, the cleaning of toxins and products, and that is so overwhelming, but it's necessary. And again, like you said, it's so much harder now because everything that we consume, everything that we are putting on our body topically or on our face or on our skin or like drinking out of plastic or this thing, there's so many things.
Yeah.
So how do you what's your piece of advice for that? How do you kind of like underwhelm yourself in these situations where you're trying to do a complete change?
Yeah, so there's two different kinds of people. I always say that right off the bat. It's just true. There's people who are a little bit too extreme and their stress is kind of causing all their hormonal issues by getting a little too crazy about it. Because I think some people they try to control things they can't control. Because like, for example, when you're going to work every single day, you can't control and there's fragrance being sprayed around the office building when there's Clorox wipes. I think some people get a little bit because I can sometimes get that way too, but I have to remember I'm like, I can't control that. Like, let it go. I think a lot of people think it's really hard. So if it's starting to interrupt your daily life where it's just, making you upset, like it's happening around you, but you can't control it, like just remind yourself that it's okay. Like they're just part of our daily life. But when it's something you can control, that's when it's, more helpful to make sure that you are reducing that. So when you come home, like I do think it's important that people aren't using Clorox. They're trying to use the most, all
Branch
these
basics.
Yeah, there's a ton of natural options in terms of cleaning agents at home. So that's something that's really important to do. Fragrance is specifically really not the best because it's going to be, again, messing up with specifically estrogen levels. And a lot of the research when it comes with fragrance, it's going to also it can interrupt ovulation, so causing irregular cycles. And EMF is another thing. Now we're talking about toxins. There's a lot to also talk about with EMF and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, all those things. And again, we cannot eliminate that, but even just put your phone like outside of your bedroom if you can, using a traditional alarm clock to wake yourself up.
I tell
that can
people slow and steady. I feel like there's things that you can do throughout the day. There's a lot of things that you can do throughout the day. I try to sometimes make a list of like 10 things that would be better. And if I do like 3 or 4 of those things, then I'm like, okay, that's good. Or I'll like removing things a little bit at a time. I think when people think endocrine disruptors, toxic chemicals, they're like, I have to throw out my entire cleaning cabinet. And I will say I couldn't do that. Like, first of all, what a waste. So I started like slowly replacing things a little bit at a time. I also got rid of my watch like a week ago, which is kind of like, it feels weird. I even have like a tan. I'm like, I don't want the watch anymore. I'm just trying to like slow and steady one thing at a time so I don't get overwhelmed. And I feel like it's really easy to get overwhelmed because there's so many things, switching from plastic to glass, or, you know, your cookware, like there's stuff everywhere. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed with the idea of like living completely toxic. I will say too, the one thing I have noticed about myself ever since I got rid of like most fragrances in my house, I have one candle in the kitchen that every now and then, like after I mop the floor and like clean up my kitchen, I'll like light up the candle. Very rare. But I've noticed since I've taken away a lot of fragrance, now I'm super sensitive to fragrances. Like, there's a guy that I know wears cologne at the gym, and when I walk in, I can immediately smell it. And I ask everybody, I'm like, is this just me? And everyone's like, yeah, no one can smell it but you. Like, it's so strong.
Mm-hmm.
Is that common? Like, once you start pulling things away?
It's common with me. I'm not sure if there's any science behind that, but definitely happens with me. Like when I walk in somewhere and someone or if you're just sitting like a coffee shop and someone sits down like very close
like,
to you, I can start to get headaches, and a lot of people start to. Some are more sensitive than others, but I'm definitely one that gets headaches if I smell it.
I think I've become more sensitive. I don't feel like I used to be, and now that I've pulled stuff away, I'm like, wow, like I can really smell this. Like, I don't do car fragrances. I don't do like even like Windex, and like my family cleaned the floor with Fabuloso. I don't even do that anymore. Like, it's crazy how much there is when it comes to that. We have spiraled into so many really good nuggets, but I do want to go back to Mansky's Wellness. So you get off birth control, you find out what birth control is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep the ball rolling, girl.
Yeah. So, and I finally came off birth control was the summer for my senior year of college. And that's when I started to kind of experience all those symptoms. So first of all, I didn't have like a period for an entire year. And that's when I got in the conventional lab testing, which we briefly kind of talked about. But when I did finally get my period back, I got super painful periods where I couldn't even go to work. I actually had to talk to my boss about it and was like, I'm sorry, like I have to take off like every single month. It's just so unbearable. Like it is normal, I will say. It's normal to have a little bit of like pain. You are shedding your endometrial lining. So it's not like it's this like that's happening in your body. You know, it is like an inflammatory state. So that is normal, but it should not be so painful that it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even go to work. And like,
or so that I think that's a good like indicator. Like, it shouldn't be so painful. You literally cannot leave your house.
Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't have to interrupt your daily life. And so, but sadly, it happens to a lot of people. And so that's something that's obviously really important, like with my company. But that's what started happening. I started getting all like my breakouts kind of back. So it was really, again, like PCOS. A big thing is it's very like chin, jawline dominant, like lower cheeks. That's like very common with androgens. And again, we do produce like androgens. So it is important to produce these hormones in small amounts, but too many is going to increase oil production. So that's why high androgens usually contribute to breakouts, if anyone was curious of like why that happens. But yeah, a lot of this.
How did you get your PCOS diagnosed, if you don't mind me asking?
So like I said, I don't have a full-blown PCOS. Like I had characteristics of it on my lab.
Cool.
I think I still need to like go in and go to my conventional lab testings. They can only go like so
I think they
far.
do like don't they do like a vaginal ultrasound or like a regular ultrasound?
So that is actually a myth. So when it comes to PCOS, yeah, you are right, like cysts in your ovaries, but there's actually, you don't have to have all those characteristics. Only two, I don't know the exact, I think it's like 2 out of the 5. So we'll just go into like characteristics of PCOS. So basically it's like irregular cycles, acne, people have facial hair, sometimes just a little bit, and again, like lack of ovulation and cysts on your ovaries. And so I don't know the exact, so people are going to look at the criteria, but if you look up criteria for PCOS, you only need to have like 2 out of 3 out of 5 criteria.
They're like, you got it.
Diagnosed. So you do not have to have cysts on your ovaries to have PCOS. That is a myth. And I think that's
Wow.
something so important, because that's why like I don't have full-on PCOS. I really don't have like all those symptoms, but because
No,
PCOS,
this is relatable. This is super relatable because I had a friend who she was diagnosed with PCOS, and a couple months back, like I was really struggling with losing weight, and that's a topic for a different time. But I remember like asking her, they did an ultrasound, there was cysts, like, and I was like, I don't think I have it. And maybe you can relate to this, but she was like, Veronica, when you have PCOS, what do doctors tell you to do? They tell you to move your body a little bit more and just have like a better diet. And she's like, you already do that. So she's like, so maybe you think that you don't have PCOS, maybe you have underlying PCOS, but because you already do all the things, it's just like undiagnosed. So I never did the ultrasound. I went with a different method, as I will say, again, a topic for a different time. But for a second there, I was like, do I have PCOS? And we never tested for it. We never did anything for it. I think I mentioned it to my doctor and she was like, you could, but then we never really moved forward after that. And that was with my PCP.
Yeah, exactly. I said, like, there's just criteria. Like, if you meet, like, it's only 2 or 3 out of the points out of like all the criteria they have, and it obviously has to go on for longer than like 6 months. It can't be like, oh, I'm having some irregularity in my cycle and some like breakouts for just like 3 months out of the year. Like, it has to be very chronic. Like, it's always happening. Yeah. Really helping it to kind of know if you have it. But
cool. Yeah. So you. Back to the period. I'm going to be like, all aboard, back to the period. Or wait, back to Mansky's Wellness.
Yeah. So I dealt with all those symptoms. And again, I started to do like, when did I think I just started, honestly, my next step was I started just reading into like all the research on how nutrition plays a role in hormone health. And that's kind of as I started to get better, like in my journey and started to understand my own like imbalances with my hormones and understanding how important nutrition was, that's really when I started seeing a lot of like progress. So I implemented seed cycling. I think I first came across seed cycling from like Dr. Jolene Brighten from reading Beyond the
I love
Pill.
her.
Yeah, great book if you come off of birth control. She talks about that a little bit. Obviously, In the Flow, all these like books, they just basically educate you about your cycle and symptoms that aren't normal, but are often called normal, and just how to use nutrition and like lifestyle to help support it. And although women's health is extremely underfunded, that's a whole other big topic. There is a lot in terms of nutrients and hormones and how they help. So, and that's obviously what I talk a lot about on my Instagram, is really just how can we use nutrition to support our hormones and our cycle health. So that's really kind of what I started doing. Was I started using seed cycling. I did start to cut out a lot of like the toxins like in my environment. So just like, again, things we just talked about, like cutting out like plastic and eliminating a lot of the cleaning products I was using, and also just making sure I was eating enough food. So the 3 basic things I think that they should be talked about enough, but they aren't, is like the basic functions like ovulating is to make sure you're eating enough calories. I know for a lot of women, like eating more than 2,000 can be like, for some reason, I think 2,000 calories like nothing to me in like my head, but like that is like minimum for most women in terms of ovulatory function, like healthy body weight, and sometimes even more if you're really active. And I think because we have grown up in a society where it's like dieting and like low calories, low fat, like we have just not been prepared. And like I definitely blame it on the diet industry in terms of
my next question. That was like a really good tie-in. Do you think that the society that we've grown up in has any kind of tie to all the hormonal imbalances that we're seeing in women now?
Yeah.
Like the restriction dieting, the keto, the no carb, low carb, all the things.
So fats are, we want to talk about keto. Fats are one of the most important things for women that we need. Fats literally, so obviously all macronutrients, they serve different functions. Fats are really important for producing hormones specifically. So your sex hormones, so progesterone, estrogen, really important for that. A lot of women who, especially bodybuilding, it's that I feel like sometimes I talk to a lot of bodybuilding girls too, and I'm like, it makes a lot of sense, because like when you perform, that's just a great example of just like some fitness to the max, is when people are really under depleting themselves and over, working themselves out, like women athletes, those are great examples of like people I think that like definitely when they have hormonal imbalances, it's usually stemmed from the diet industries, because you're just not being able to prepare. You're not being able to obviously give your body enough nutrients, give your body enough fats, and you're obviously over exercising, which is decreasing the amount of calories you have, which is basically energy in your body. And so what your body does when it doesn't have enough energy is just going to shut down anything that's not like essential. So like you have to breathe, you have to be able to have a pulse, like all these things are
Yeah.
important. But the period, it's like, well, we can, even though it is essential, they're like, okay, we're going to shut this down. We're going to shut down ovulation so you can't have a baby. Because if you're too stressed from not eating enough food or overworking out, which is basically stressors that your body, especially as women that we flag, that's really important to make sure we're not having those stresses or that.
So guilty on that whole thing, because I also did a show in 2019. And I will say that, like, amongst other things that probably had an important factor into this imbalance and the acne was, like, after the show, I think that's when I was like, oh, wow, like, I'm wrecked. Like, I think I lost like 17 pounds in like 12 weeks, which, I mean, I think for someone like my height, my size was a little excessive. And I have a lot of respect for women that do bodybuilding. I will never do it again. And I don't recommend anybody to do it because I feel like that had a major role in wrecking me every which way that it could.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, I have a lot of respect for women, but I feel like I hear a lot from women after they do it. Like, oh, I don't have a period. I'm like, I know why.
I know. Because you're eating 200 calories and you're working out twice a day. Girl, what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the whole thing to know is that when your body's under stress, it's just going to shut down, reproduction. So, especially women who like can't get pregnant or like are dealing with infertility and things like that. Like we have to make sure we're addressing the basics. Like I said, we were definitely set up for failure because even if we are consuming enough calories, we have a whole other problem. And that's the type of ingredients that we're having in the food, everything that's diet and like light and all those types of ingredients that are added. Those also like aren't the best as well because all of them are harming our gut. And when our gut's not the best, like our hormones are also not going to be balanced either. So
Yeah.
a lot to go on.
I think that's a really good, I like, kind of off topic, but kind of not. So I love when, like, I feel like the older generation, they're like, well, when we were younger, no one was having these problems. I'm like, yeah, because you guys weren't exposed to all the things that we're exposed to now. Like, I feel like it's so common for people to battle like infertility. I don't know what the statistics are with infertility, but you hear about it so often. And then you get like, again, these baby boomers are like, oh, well, we never had to deal with it. I'm like, yeah, you also weren't ingesting like thousands of chemicals every single day. Like it's just a whole different time. And I feel like the older generation is a little insensitive to infertility. That's just my take.
In terms of statistics, that's like in terms of obviously I pay a lot of attention to like America. So like 15% of couples like every single year, struggle like having kids. And I think again, as we see from just like our culture, which is totally fine, but like more women now are working in their 20s. And then when you start to get older in your 30s, egg quality starts to decrease. And so egg quality is just really important for obviously having. So when that starts to decrease, then, it's going to be harder to get pregnant. So that's just something that's obviously important. Like there's a lot to talk about with infertility. Yeah. There's a lot on the men's side
There's
too.
So much. So you start making these, okay, so the seed cycling, I've tried the bars. The seed cycling kits, it's 2 bags, right? There is like a spring and a summer. I know they have different names for them, but can you tell everybody a little bit about what seed cycling is? Like, I know exactly what it meant to seed cycle because I would buy like the pumpkin seeds, the sunflower seeds, the chia seeds, and I would have like try to implement them. And then when I found out that people like you, genius people like you, blend them all together and they're like, here, this is what you take. I was like, this is genius and made my life way easier. So can you explain a little bit about how you got to meshing everything together and then how you built this product that now people love, that I love?
Yeah, so basically seed cycling is just rotating different seeds in specific phases of your menstrual cycle. So I'm sure a lot of viewers, I think we talked a lot about hormones, but not about the cycle. So you have 4 phases of your cycle: menstruation, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. And basically all that means is you have all these different hormonal fluctuations happening all cycle long. You'll have all these different events, and so you're going to have different nutrient needs. And so seed cycling is just a really easy food-based remedy that you can just add in to make sure you're giving your hormones the nutrients it needs with these they're tiny seeds. They're extremely mighty when it comes to nutrition. So when you have your period and your endometrial lining is being shed, your hormones drop. That's what's triggering the bleed. And so you're oftentimes very tired, and we want to make sure we're consuming iron. So this is kind of when you begin seed cycling. So you have the glow, that's the pumpkin and flax that we talked about. So that's going to have the iron to help replenish our blood cells. I always say pair it with vitamin C just because it's going to help absorb the iron, as plant-based iron, like non-heme, isn't going to be as absorbable as like a heme iron, like steak or beef
Like
liver.
vitamin C, how? Like a juice, like an orange juice, or like
Like
just
orange, limes, red peppers, like you can add
got
in like a smoothie or with yogurt with berries, or on like a spinach salad with like red
okay,
peppers.
perfect.
Foods. And so then as you begin your follicular phase, that is after your period ends, is when estrogen begins to rise. So this is the main hormone that's helping thicken your uterine lining to prepare for ovulation. It's really important for overall fertility, and it's really important to make sure that follicular development, all this is happening with egg quality, egg development, to make sure that ovulation is being supported. So basically, when your follicular phase, you want to consume nutrients that are really high in antioxidants. So think antioxidants, think like colorful foods, so like pomegranate, like blackberries, cherries, all of those. The more colors you eat, the more antioxidants you're consuming. When it comes to the seeds, the pumpkin and flax, zinc is a really important nutrient. It's really high in pumpkin seeds. So zinc is a strong antioxidant. It helps with supporting egg quality. It's really important for supporting ovulation, which is, again, when your egg is released from your ovary. And again, ovulation is really important just for overall like hormone health. It's really important for overall mood, helping you sleep better, because you can't actually produce progesterone, which is the main hormone in the next half of your cycle, if you're not ovulating. So we'll get to that. But zinc's really important, found in pumpkin seeds, why we're consuming that seed during this time. And flaxseed's also important here, which is also in that blend, because it has lignans. So lignans are really important for estrogen metabolism, which we just said estrogen is rising during this half of your cycle. And omega-3s are also really important. And flaxseed's really high in omega-3s
And
as
just
well.
to kind of clarify for our listeners, so there are 2 bags. So it kind of like, and literally on the bag, it says day 1 to 14 and then day 15 to 28. So it makes it really easy. And like you mentioned already, all the different things that you can use it with. But like, for example, I've used mine in Greek yogurt. You can sprinkle some over your eggs if you want. You can put it in a smoothie, salads. You can literally put them on anything. And also, when we get to the end of the podcast, she'll share her Instagram. But their Instagram page is like a slice of heaven, and very, very demure compared to my feed, because your guys' is like so nice. It's got a beautiful aesthetic, and it's got so much information, and it's like so like easy, tangible to digest information about seed cycling, food, and all that fun stuff. Can we talk a little bit about the bars? Because I have also tried the bars, and those are awesome possum.
Yes. Yeah. So basically the bars are, so I get the question a lot to start off with this. We're like, wait, is that a seed? Like, is that also seed cycling product? Is that not? It is technically, it's not seed cycling. So it's certainly not the exact dosages of the seeds. It's its own authentic original product. I was like, I really want to create my own product around cycle syncing, because I feel there's already a lot of seed cycling products on the market. I'm like, I really want to create something that's around the cycle, but we're using different types of foods outside of the seeds. We're still using seeds in it, but we're using different superfoods that are really encouraged for all these different events that are happening all cycle long. So basically on your period, there is one certain bar. It's very high in anti-inflammatory spices. So that's obviously, when we think about menstruation, we think inflammation. Like, how
that's
can
the nurture one, right?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, the chai spice tastes like chai spice. Some people think it tastes like pumpkin, like gingerbread, just because of like the dash of clove we have in there. Cinnamon.
Does it have cranberry in it? Why do I feel like I remember it has like some kind of cranberry? Am I wrong?
That's the cherry berry you're talking about.
Okay, cool.
There's cherry and there's like goji berries, and I can get kind of where you're getting that cranberry taste.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the chai spice bar is like really great for decreasing inflammation. There's 2,400 milligrams of literal spices. And so all the spices together are really supportive for, again, decreasing inflammation, helping with blood circulation. So the more blood circulation we have, the less we can have those like blood clots, which really aren't the best when we are having our bleed. And it's also really great for just helping bring oxygen and nutrients to the tissues of your uterus, which is really important for kind of helping with period pain, and just helping like period experience. And then
this
the next
is
bar,
also really, really smart for like when we talk about how overwhelming this can be for seed cycling, educating yourself on your menstrual cycle. Literally, these products take half of the work, if not more, out of it completely, because it literally says everything you need to know on the packaging. It's so simple. So instead of feeling like, oh, I have to get these spices and these ingredients and these seeds in there, it literally, like, girl, your brain, I wish I could live in it, because that is so smart. So freaking smart.
Thank you. Yeah, and a lot of people are like, why? Some people ask why I went in the bar industry, because the bar industry is very cutthroat. Everyone's like, why didn't you just like create like bites or something like that? I'm like, honestly, when you look at the protein bar industry, there's nothing when it comes to supporting hormone health. And I'm like, I understand it looks crazy right now, but I promise you, like, I know it was the right route to go in terms of direction, because I think a lot of people can relate that when you go to the grocery store and you're looking at bars, there is nothing that is really supportive. It's very supportive of your hormone health. And GMOs is something that's really important when it comes to hormone health, and that's in almost every single bar on the market, even newer bars. So that was why I kind of went that direction. But in terms of the other bars, if anyone's curious with the other flavors, the cherry berry, which is really great for after your period. So is estrogen starting to rise? Like we talked about that a little bit earlier. But there's also maca powder, so great for libido, preparing for ovulation. That's really important. This is the time where you're actually prepared for like intercourse. So your body biologically like wants to have, I don't know if I can say sex, but have sex during this time.
You can say sex. You can say anything you want. Also, I will say, I can concur. Like, when I get off my period, my skin starts glowing. My hair starts flowing the right way when I walk into the room.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like natural. Your body's like, let's make a baby.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the inspiration behind, why we had certain ingredients in that one. So like 1 gram of maca's in there. We still have 1,000 milligrams of ginger in there, which is really important too. And also like Brazil nuts, which is high in selenium. I'm sure you're like aware of like the Brazil nut.
My husband there was like a little phase there. He hasn't done it recently, probably because we haven't bought any, but he would have 1 Brazilian nut a day. I'm like, that's it? He's like, yeah, just 1. I'm like, okay, weird. I didn't know why, but now I know why.
Yeah, exactly. Because you really only need 1 to 2 Brazil nuts. Yeah, so we only use like a little bit of Brazil nuts in each bar, but it's a really important nutrient, selenium. Again, for egg quality, for oxidative stress, so decreasing that, which is really important for hormone balance. And the other bar is basically your nutty cacao. So it's a really great one. It's like 14 days out of the month you're actually taking that. So someone was like, you better like the nutty cacao, because it's like that's kind of the bar you're taking.
Yeah, you're like, you gotta have a nutty cacao.
Like that cacao powder. So
I have barely looked at the outline because we are just like rolling left and right here. But I there is one question that you kind of touched base on a little bit, and we can kind of circle back. Is you were talking about how, I'm going to talk about how our education system does not teach you about, literally they're like, women get their period, here's a condom so you don't get pregnant. So how, like, I know that there's people like you and me that can definitely teach people to really advocate for different kinds of education for young girls. But like, where do we start with that when it comes to really educating everyone? Like, I know that I'm going to have daughters and I'm going to be able to teach them about the 4 phases of their cycle, not that they just bleed and they're psychotic for a whole week before, like there's a reason why you're psychotic for a whole week before. So how do we turn this leaf into I don't know, how do we make it better?
Honestly, I think just bring like more awareness about the cycle in general. So I honestly I think some are worried about the next generation. I'm not. I do think schools are going to be a little bit better. I may just be being hopeful, but I do think we're going to start seeing that, because people like us, our age, as we get older, that's just going to be the majority of people working in schools, I feel like. And so I do think it's going to get better. And if it doesn't, there's so much that like people our age and we have kids that we're going to be able to teach our kids, just bringing more awareness. Like I said, I'm not blaming my mom for anything, but I think everyone has the same story. We're only taught really even about our periods from our parents as well. And so I think as we get older, I do think it is going to get better, because majority of our generation starting to know. And it's just gonna continue, to go down. It's the people.
When I get this grin on my face, it's because my mind is thinking of like a story, and I have to tell you because it will be really funny. But when I first got my period, my mom's probably watching this on Facebook Live. I can guarantee it, and I'm about to rat her out. So I get my period. I didn't know it was my period. I go up to her. She's in the laundry room, and I'm like, "Hey," she's like. I was like, I think I shit myself. She's like, what? And I was like, I feel like I'm pooping myself and I can't feel it. And she was like, let me see your underwear. And I show her my underwear and she's like, she goes in Spanish like, you idiot. But she goes, pendeja, that's your period. And I was like, well, you didn't tell me. Like, there was never any conversation. And then she follows it with saying, you know what this means, right? And I was like, I got my period. And she goes, it means that you can have babies now. And I was like, oh my God, I was in 8th grade. Like, what business do I know? I don't know any about the 4 phases. I don't know about ovulation. I don't know about anything except that I'm bleeding and I can now have a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I think the biggest thing, like when I look at younger girls, I do look at pregnancy, but I think my head always goes to just like symptoms not being normal anymore. I think that's one of the biggest, that's what I find honestly like one of the most important things in terms of young girls, because we're just going to keep having like higher infertility rates. We're going to keep having like PCOS, like issues just when people start to come off birth control, because usually people start to come off birth control when they start to have kids. If we don't start to address that these symptoms aren't normal and there's stuff to do with food and lifestyle, I think that's one of the biggest things that I find the most important with kids. And I think just naturally it's going to help women start to understand their cycle when they start to realize that, and also start to understand like there are different phases, and you can't get pregnant every single day. But I think we have to start somewhere that most people like can agree that this is something that's a real problem.
That was the other thing that was really important, is you can't just get pregnant like every single day of the month. There's a window, but that was our parents trying to scare the shit out of us to make sure that we didn't get knocked up.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, I want to talk a little bit about this before we get to closing out, because we are just rolling in here. But how did you pick your top three? Mm-hmm. Your top three. I know what I'm thinking. Hold on. Your values. Your top three values for Mansky's Wellness. Because I read them on the website and I was like, that is so perfect. And they were like almost kind of like really heartfelt as well. But I feel like that's such an important thing to have behind a growing business, is like there are core values. Can you share a little bit about how you came up with that and what they mean?
Yeah, honestly, just everything I experienced, I think in my own like personal life, my own hormonal issues, my own health problems, and also working with clients and just getting a lot of feedback from people in terms of what they found like the most admirable. I think like about having a food-based kind of approach, I just started to intertwine all of that. And it was like, really what we're doing is empowering advocacy. So that's really important, because with holistic health, you're basically, empowering people to be able to have the research they need, be able to have the resources in general they need to make their own decisions, and to really empower people to be able to ask questions as well. Because it's really, like, I think what you talked about in the beginning of the podcast is like, what are the things we can do to help, like, make sure, not that we can like trust doctors, but to give ourselves the best information that we need to like make our best decisions. And the biggest 3 points is like, in terms of self-advocating, it's usually doing your own research, asking questions, and like doing what's best for your body. Because so many times we are completely comparing ourselves to like what works for other people, and it's really like what's going to work for yourself, because everyone is so different in terms of like our health histories, and in terms of just our genetics. Like all of these things are so different, and they impact with how we eat and like our lifestyle, and like what's really the best for us. So that's the main reason why I picked like that one. And so what was the other one? Food is healthcare. So obviously my background's in nutrition. I love nutrition. I think so many times people are especially going to supplements. So not only, we can talk about pharmaceuticals too, but I think supplements are something else that I just kind of sometimes get a little bit tired about, because a lot of these supplements are very synthetic. They sometimes be very difficult to absorb due to the cheap kind of fillers they add in, the preservatives they use to increase shelf life. So food is just something I think that's not really addressed, because like I said, not only doing pharmaceuticals, but if we're not doing pharmaceuticals, it's typically pills in terms of like a supplement. So that was why I did food is healthcare. And I honestly forgot the other one that
a Celebrate Strength, which I absolutely love.
I had like 10 listed on there. I should probably have them.
There's
all of them
4,
right.
But I mean, all of them had a really like very like heartfelt message right under them. Luckily, I feel like we live in a time where like information is super accessible, which is really nice. I feel like TikTok is the new Google. I can go on TikTok and be like, tell me about the luteal phase, or meals for the luteal phase, and you get like all this amazing content. I will say, I feel like not everybody is usually in the financial spot to go to a holistic doctor. Because I feel like some holistic doctors, a lot of them actually don't take insurance or like certain kind of insurance. So what would be like your advice to people that are wanting to take a more holistic route? We already talked about doing your own research, getting yourself educated. What would be your best piece of advice for those people that maybe aren't in the financial spot to see a holistic doctor when it comes to hormonal health?
Honestly, that's exactly, I would say the same thing. Like, do your own research and get books. There are so many books. If you start, even just like Instagram's a great place to put. Obviously, there's a lot of
stuff.
Drop
us some books, sis. Give us some books, and then I'll post them on my Instagram.
So Beyond the Pill is a great one from Doc. I recommend. That was the first book I ever wrote, and that was ever wrote. Yeah, I wrote that book. That was the first book I ever read coming out birth control. I thought that was the best.
Does she also have is this normal?
Yes, put that
I
one
love
down.
that one. I read that one.
That one's a newer one. In the Flow and Women Code, and the period repair manual. That's another one. So honestly, those you're already going to learn so much. That's jam packed with information. And then
I will make sure to share those, guys. I'll share those on my Instagram. And I'll put them in the show notes. I'll get David. David, you're gonna be able to go home and talk to your wife all about her menstrual health.
I sent her Instagram already.
Oh,
so,
I love
yeah,
that.
done.
That's so sweet. Okay. Well, we are running out of time, unfortunately. That means that you are definitely going to have to come back and we can talk about how the healthcare system is trying to kill us.
Oh, they are, man, for real.
I want to give you the opportunity to let us know where we can find you. Tell us, I think we were going to do, if you wanted to do a code for our listeners for all things Mansky's Wellness, tell everybody where to find you and all that fun stuff, girlfriend.
So Mansky's _wellness is the Instagram. So a lot of like education on there, recipes, everything food for hormones is going to be on there. And Happy Hormones 10. So if you're ever interested in doing seed cycling or trying out the bars, a 10% off code. We also do lifetime, like free shipping. So we
I
always
love
cover
that. Happy Hormones 10, guys. Make sure you check her out. You already know where to find me. All things GP Soto on Instagram. What else? I think that's it. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys for coming, being here with us. See you later.